Unless you've been living under a rock for the past couple of years, you'll probably notice that mountain bikes have been getting longer in the top tube and slacker in the head angle. Manufacturers have been doing this a little bit at a time. Obviously it pays for them to be conservative. You don't want to make a bike that no one will buy. That means that they've just done a few millimetres here, a little bit off the head angle there, and people, especially those on the internet forums, have kind of gone, why are they doing this? Is it just like a trend? They're trying to sell us a new bike. Well, I thought that I'd find out how far you can go with geometry. I've no one to let down but myself and my family. So I spoke to BTR, who are a frame fabricators based in Frome in Somerset. I also spoke to a gentleman called Tony Cork from Torque Cycling, and hooked up with the Bicycle Academy, who help people build frames. With all their knowledge, we kind of put together a bit of an idea, and that was to build a very long, very slack, very silly hardtail that put all the current trends of geometry together. So, to that end, here we are. It's running around a 63.5 degree head angle, and that's with a 130mm travel fork. So that's kind of downhill bike slack and cross-country sort of travel. In terms of the top tube length, it actually uses the top tube length of a large forward geometry Mondraker. So that means the top tube is 656mm. I'm about 5'8" high. A bike that would normally fit me, and that'd be about 600mm top tube. So this thing is very long. To counter some of that, it also needs a very steep seat angle, and we used a 75.5 degree seat angle. A few bikes tend to be 74.5, that's pretty steep, sort of on trend. I decided to go as far forwards as I could. The main effect of that is that the bike should still climb, because your weight's kind of tipped further forwards. It means that you're not going to be super far away from the front end when you're on a steep climb. It means you're not going to be wheeling all over the place. You may have noticed that the front end of the bike looks very, very weird, and that's because it uses a Mondraker on-off 10mm stem. Obviously with normal stem you need to fit in the steerer tube there and then your handlebar there. To get any shorter you need to actually kind of stack them one on top of each other. There is some compromise in that. It means that the front end height is obviously lifted up quite a bit. And slightly more usable things, yes, if you want to tighten your headset you'll need to take the handlebars off. So a bit faffy, but again it works and it gets sort of the handlebars in a reasonable position. With such a long top tube, if I used a normal stem, like even a 30mm one, those handlebars would be very, very far away, and that means that you actually get a lot more back pain and it becomes uncomfortable on sort of longer rides, unless I start doing a lot of yoga, which I have no plans to. The other areas where we went basically as extreme as we could go were on chainstay length. We've got them to the shortest they could possibly be while still fitting in a decent volume tyre and having a bit of space for mud. We did the same with the BB height. That's basically as low as you'd want to go, and at the moment it's running 175mm cranks. The pedals meet the ground quite often. I think if I ran 170mm items, it'd probably be a little bit better, but I think going to the extreme of 165 would be there. There's actually some good theory behind all this stuff. One, crank length doesn't actually influence the amount of power that you put out as much as you might think. There's been a lot of research in sort of road cycling world, and the loss of power that you can put out isn't actually proportional to crank length. Because again, you run short crank, you tend to spin faster. The main thing is though, how does it ride? When it was built up and it was finally ready and we bolted all the SRAM kit that we were given onto it, I was kind of worried to take it for a ride, because it's sort of like, what if I have actually built a completely useless, unusable bike that you just can't ride? However, and it's also actually a slight disappointment, it is completely usable and it's really quite fine. There are certain compromises in some areas. Again, like if you mostly ride really tight, twisty single track, you're not going to like this bike. It takes quite a bit of steering effort to get around stuff. If you like sort of steeper, more technical, faster stuff, it's absolutely amazing. Those are the things that you sort of expect, but then some different areas, when it comes to climbing, you kind of go, oh, it's got a slack head angle, it's just going to be useless, it'll wander all over the place. It doesn't. It's actually one of the best climbing hardtails I've ever ridden, and I'm not just saying that because I had it made. That super long wheelbase means that you can get a lot of your weight forwards, and you can really balance sort of rear wheel traction and stability. And okay, on very low speed climbs it does get a bit floppy, but by and large you can just sort of grunt your way through that. So what does that kind of prove at the end? Well, it proves that mountain bike geometry is still pretty conservative, but more to a point, it proves that mountain bike geometry is actually very specific to the job at hand. I had one main thing in mind when making this bike, and that was for it to be an absolute laugh riding down a hill. and that it does. The fact that it can get back up them all right is a good benefit, but for a lot of people, probably for what they do all the time, it's going to be massively flawed. And that's why mountain bike geometry is always a compromise between it being good at certain extremes of the scale and then it not being good in other areas. So generally manufacturers try and balance as much of that out so they can get a bike that a lot of people will want to ride. And if a manufacturer just went, right, make a bike that's good for going really fast down this particular trail, then they build a very good bike for that particular trail, but they have to cater to everyone, which is why it's an interesting experiment in geometry. And I don't think we found the extremes of what you could do, but I think we have found the extremes of what is usable for most people.